Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be talking about my fusion plan for getting the latest traditional fusion in the game. I think his name is Grant, however you say this, Granny T, but Granyt Doorkeep, that's what we're going to go with, a legendary HP-based Spirit Affinity champion. Now, as I already mentioned, this is a traditional style fusion, meaning that we do have to collect a bunch of rares, fuse them or level them up, ascend them, fuse them into epics, level those up and ascend them, and then fuse them into the legendary. And of course, you can see the timeline there. We only have 2 weeks and 2 days to get that completed, and this will disappear at the end of that time, so make sure to fuse him once you do everything else, assuming you are going for him. But that's kind of what we're trying to discuss in this video, right? We're trying to see, is this guy worth your resources investing in him? What can he do? Now, I don't have test server access or anything like that, so I'm kind of going off of what I've seen and what I've just read through the kit. And in fact, let's just go through the kit for the sake of it here. But yeah, once again, legendary HP based Spirit Affinity, and he's a dwarf. Cool aesthetic as well, kind of like the gem cursed vibe going on there with some runes on the skin and whatnot. Interesting dude. But yeah, in terms of the base stats, start off there, 24,000 on the HP. That's pretty high for an HP-based nuker. He's definitely a nuker, as we'll kind of see as we go through the kit here. Defense is respectable, 1100. He's not defense-based, but he is nonetheless going to be relatively tanky. Speed is pretty darn high for base speed on a nuker. 105 is on the higher end, especially for a legendary, non-like mythical champion and whatnot. And of course, he has the extra crit damage, as you'd expect, that being a nuker. So let's work our way forwards here with the A1 here. Triple hitter, a single target, but it has a 100% chance when booked of removing a buff from the target, and that is on each hit. So you have 3 chances to remove a buff from the target, which can add up to a lot. But more importantly, each hit ignores 20% of the target's defense, just off rip. So you add that to the Savage set, you're ignoring 45% of defense just on the A1 triple hitter. That could be a massive smack into more squishy enemies, and even some tanks, depending on how much defense they have. Before attacking, it will place increased accuracy on all allies, not just himself, which is good. It helps the entire team. And then he will also have a 100% chance when booked of placing decreased defense and block buffs. So kind of a supreme Uugo type champion here, different affinity as well. So keep that in mind if you want to run them on different teams. But yeah, as you'd expect, this is an excellent setup for other damage dealers. It's a good setup for himself for later subsequent moves, as we'll see. But he's just a solid debuffer. Increased accuracy means that you don't necessarily have to run him with a ton of accuracy. That is one of the more common problems you'll run into with nukers who need accuracy to do stuff in their kit, or as I usually call them, utility nukers. So having to build accuracy means that you have an accuracy banner instead of an attack banner, defense banner, HP banner, whatever their damage scales off of, and thus you're missing out on damage potential and chasing accuracy. But in this case, you could build them with a little bit of accuracy, maybe 200. You add increased accuracy to that, it increases it by 1.5, and then you're probably going to be able to land this on some of the squishy or low resistance nukers that are on the enemy team. You're definitely not going to be able to land it on some sort of high resistance UDK, Duchess, Siffy type deal, but it might be enough to do more damage to some of the squisher champions. Now, unfortunately, before attacking only applies to the increased accuracy, and then you place the debuffs after you attack, so you won't have the benefit of decreased defense before you deal your damage, so that will reduce the amount of damage he could potentially do from this AoE. Then lastly, on the A3 here, we have attacks 1 enemy single target attack, but before attacking, it will fully cleanse himself, so remove all debuffs from himself. He will place Shatter on himself and increase damage on all allies for 2 turns. So this is both buffs across all allies for 2 turns, so that is great. And for those who don't know, Shatter is a relatively new buff that allows you to ignore defense equal to the percentage there, so extra 15% ignore defense against your enemies, on top of boosting their crit damage by 30% as well. This attack will ignore unkillable, stoneskin, and block damage, and if the target is not under any of those 3, it will instead deal 100% more damage, i.e. it will deal double damage. And lastly, it will also grant an extra turn if this kills an enemy. Now, unfortunately, this is kind of where I was a little bit disappointed by the showcases that I saw as far as going into stoneskin. I always, my ears always perk up when I see a champion who could ignore stoneskin. I'm a huge fan of ignoring stoneskin or, breaking stoneskin, because I do find it a very annoying set in the game. But from what I've seen, this ability does not hit quite hard enough to reliably kill people underneath their stoneskin. Maybe if they're like a squishy nuker, like a Georgid, or, someone who's really, really easy to kill regardless, he can definitely take them out and still get the extra turn and, everything else that this ability provides. But he's not going to be able to handle a super tanky champion in stoneskin. And this being a single target attack means you're completely susceptible to UDK just popping in there and taking that hit, preventing you from thus trying to take out the squishier nuker who might also be in stoneskin. However, before you get too disappointed, on the flip side, for targets who are not under unkillable stoneskin or block damage, the double damage on top of the multiplier with the shatter and everything, it actually can be a pretty sizable smack. So ironically, it's better if they aren't under stoneskin, despite that, this reading like it, you really want to go for champion under stoneskin. But when they're not, it hits twice as hard, obviously. But that twice as hard is substantial, and it might be worth your while if that is what you're interested in using him for. And of course, he's tanky, just being HP based. And then the part of the stone faced passive here at the start of his turn removes true fear, a bunch of CC aside from like sheep. Essentially, he just cleanses himself. This is kind of the same passive as Lord Entertainer Fabian, who's infamous for that, being able to be relatively unstoppable unless you lock him out or kind of keep his turn meter suppressed. And then, of course, this little bonus here where it just increases his damage inflicted against targets with no buffs by 20%. So if they don't have any buffs, he just does 20% more damage. Awesome. And that will impact all of his abilities. Now, the crit rate aura is a bit of a bummer. Crit rate in all battles by 20%. You usually don't want to run, champions at less than 100% crit rate, especially nukers. But it could be useful in certain situations. But, speed in arena or speed in all battles probably would have been a lot more useful on this guy, at least for practical uses. So what are my thoughts overall on this champion? In terms of a letter grade, I think he's kind of in that B tier range. I'd have to see a little bit more, see more uses of him against real opponents. The problem with looking at test server footage is some people don't have gear on the champions, or they're just really, really stacked out legendary mythicals that you and I are probably not going to encounter all that often. And so for the general populace, it's not that accurate to kind of see how he fails against a nice the Shadow Thief or something like that. So I'd like to see him used in more general context and more approachable arena settings. But in terms of my particular usage, I don't really plan to use him. Raid is already fairly oversaturated when it comes to nuking champions, and so you only have so much gear, so much good gear that you want to use on good champions, and so he just doesn't seem to quite fit the bill at the moment compared to my other HP based nukers. So I don't really plan to use him. However, I do plan to go for him. So if you do plan to go for him alongside me, then we can hop over to the lovely spreadsheet here and talk about the fusion plan in a different form. So for those of you who are new to the channel and or unfamiliar with this format, this will be linked in the description box down below, and this is a catalog of fusion plan calendars for various fusions dating all the way back to Pythion, which I believe was back in 2022. So lots of previous fusions in here, and the purpose of the spreadsheet is just to kind of document all of the the calendar itself is here in the center, but it documents all of the milestones for each of the events and tournaments as part of each of the fusions. That way you could go back in time and kind of verify and look at what did we do in the past and predict what we might be able to see from future events in the future. So in terms of this particular fusion, we do have a pretty standard layout in terms of the calendar itself. We have the standard 4 dungeon split. We don't have any special event dungeon going on right now. They have done that a couple times in recent fusions. We have 2 classic arena tournaments. We have a champion training tournament. We have 3 gear hunter events. They renamed it Dungeon Divers. I guess too many people were complaining about Sand Devil and Phantom Shogun being dungeons and not getting credit, so they pivoted, and now they're gear hunter events, meaning that you get points for hunting gear, which kind of solves that problem of semantics at least. But I digress here. There are 3 gear enhancements as well. There's a champion training event, and of course there is a summon rush, and thankfully there's no hero's path in the fusion either, and that has popped up a few times here and there in recent years. In addition to the calendar itself, I do have a layout of all of the days where the potion keeps are open, so that does matter a little bit, especially if you're low on void potions. If we're sending the 16 rares, of course, void keep will only be open 2 times during the course of the fusion, so just keep that in mind if you're low or missing on those, because they're only open once per week. We have CVC listed here, and we also have the predicted shard events going on as well. We are definitely headed towards the progressive chance events this weekend because we of course just had 2x voids. Prior to that, we oddly had 2x ancients, and so I'm expecting that the champion chase associated with this fusion is going to be 2x sacreds, which is a little bit of a bummer because that does make it more costly in terms of overall shard, but overall shards. So the main thing to focus on here is over on the right hand side, where we talk about all the milestones for each of the events and tournaments. Anything marked with an asterisk means that it's a predicted amount based off historical precedent, i.e. all of the previous fusions that we've had over recent years. And so I'm kind of carrying values forward based on the length of the events and or tournaments and kind of predicting what I expect the values to be. But of course I go in and update them with the actual values once the events and tournaments go live, so we do have a log of what they actually were in time. In addition to that, I do also track how much silver I spend on each of the gear enhancement events. So you can see, for example, on Donatello I spent 19 million on the first one, 15 on the 2nd, 19 on the 3rd. And I also keep track of the shards that I use personally for getting certain amounts of milestones in the champion chase and or the summon rush. And so you can see here for Donatello, once again, I did a shardless champion chase, meaning I didn't pull any shards at all. I just used a bunch of fragment champions to get the amount of points needed here. And you can see for the summon rush, I just did 4 sacreds and 1200 mysteries, which is a grand total of 3200 points. So I just kind of mixed and matched different shard types. And you can see that again for every single fusion in this spreadsheet, what my particular strategy was for getting these events complete. That's not a prescription for you to necessarily copy what I plan to do in my spreadsheet, but nonetheless, it is giving you an idea of what my approach was and has been over the years. The last thing to talk about on this particular tab is the energy plan here at the bottom, which is again is not a prescription for how you should manage your energy, but it is nonetheless a catalog of how I plan to spend my energy over the course of the fusion, with the priority being the value that's listed first. So for example, when there's an overlap of champion training and dragon, it's starting later this week, I will be prioritizing champion training and then making sure I do enough of the dragon tournament to maintain steady progress in the events. And this exact type of overlap is what I like to call a pinch point, meaning it will be a pinch on your resources, namely energy, during this period, because you're going to have to focus on 2 different things at the same time, and that might be difficult, especially if you're more of a newer player. Because this is a traditional style fusion, it might also be helpful to hop over to the fusion potion calculator tab, where we have the requirements for this particular fusion, that being 4 force epics and then the 16 void rares. And so this is the layout of potions you will need to ascend all of the rares and the epics needed for the fusion. So the main thing to focus on there, of course, is the 24 superior force potions, again highlighting the fact that we do have the force keep days listed here. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 opportunities over the course of the fusion to farm that, if that is something you need to do for yourself, and then 12 superior arcanes, which of course you can farm at any day. And then, you know, if you're more in the early game, you may have to worry a little bit more about the lesser and the greater, but if you're kind of in the mid game and beyond, that you should already have these and you should be good to go. So yeah, lots of cool tools in this particular spreadsheet, so feel free to hit that link in the description box down below to check it out and peruse around and see if it helps you in your progression. So now, hopping back into the game, let's talk about some of the current events going on right now pertaining to the fusion and highlight some of my initial strategies for completing them. As usual, at the start of fusions, I like to take a snapshot of my supplies, and namely silver and gems, because a lot of people do have the mindset that it is relatively difficult and or impossible to do all fusions despite being free to play, and I definitely complete every single fusion, at least I have since I've started playing the game, aside from a couple instances that I messed up, but that was not indicative of my supplies, but I digress. But so we're taking a snapshot here, let's call it 4150 on the gems, and I know it was earlier today, of course, because I've done some of the events already, or some portion of the events already, but I started at around 265 million on the silver. So I will summarize this at the end of the fusion in 2 weeks time and talk about the deltas between my initial starting point and the end point in terms of the gem silver. And of course, I'll talk about the shard deltas as well. So the first thing I want to highlight is my prioritization of like my energy stores. And so you can see here in the inventory that I have a couple of previous events or promo code or rewards that are going to expire in a few days here. And I typically save those bigger chunks of energy for champion training. I do like to grind campaign for that, to make sure that I'm leveling up champions and developing them on my account, and that's typically what I prioritize those for. And you can see I have tons and tons and tons and tons of energy refills dating all the way back to, like, you know, a few days remaining, and so all of those are ready to go as needed, again primarily for champion training, but that's going to be a few days away. You can see here that CVC starts in 5 hours, at least at the time of this recording. So for right now, I'm going to be holding off on grinding anything. I'm going to make sure that I get my energy down to, you know, as close to 0 as possible before I go to sleep. But when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to hit the ground running and start tackling more so of the events going on right now. So we have the Gear Hunters event, Gear Hunter event 1 that has already started. It started coincidentally with Fire Night, the Fire Night tournament. We'll take a look at that later as well. So you can see here, I've made a little bit of progress. This is using energy from yesterday's reset that I saved for today. So I made some progress or some headway there. But again, I'm holding off for now because I do want to get credit for CVC, and it is a PR CVC as well. So it would behoove of me to maximize my point output relative to that. Gear enhancement starts tomorrow, so that's great. I'm going to be, you know, doing a gear cleanse to get rid of to make some space in my inventory, but also you get points for leveling up gear in CVC. And you can see here for the Smart Fella Titan event, event. I'm hoping that if I don't claim this until tomorrow, then I get some points in CVC for getting a 5-star soul or something like that. So I've held off on that one as well. And then when it comes to the tournaments, pretty straightforward there. But once again, the Fire Nut tournaments are already live. So you can see here I've made some progress throughout today. Again, using the energy from yesterday's reset and using the daily accrual energy from today as well. So we're going to be holding off on using or doing too much more of this because I do want to try and get as much credit during CVC as possible. So yeah, that's going to do it for my fusion plant for getting Final Answer Granyt Doorkeep. That's what I'm going to be calling him. And yeah, let me know in the comment section down below, what are your thoughts on the champion? Do you agree with the grade of the B minus tier? Do you think he's better? Do you think he's worse? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And of course, let me know if you're going for the fusion, because I do like to see if people are interested in these types of champions or if they do want to skip them and save the resources for something else going on. Of course, there's been lots of rumors about guaranteed for Leo and Raphael and all the other turtles that were not free and or accessible. So I know a lot of people might be skipping this in hopes of getting their hands on someone else or one of the turtles that are arguably better. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well if you are enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.